As Katja mentioned, we've been working with Strelka now for the last 6 months. We're here, and we now feel very much part of the team and part of the institute. Really, the team has become our friends. We've become definitely collaborators, and we've had very little time to reflect. It's been an extremely busy process, and something that we have. I guess we feel extremely proud of. So I'm just going to kick it off. I guess I'd like to thank those who aren't here as well. Vivara, who's the director of the institute, or coming to be the director of the institute. I'd like to thank Misha, who's the design director of Strelka. He's been an amazing collaborator. Some of you may know Misha. He's been invaluable to this process. It's been amazing to get to know Moscow, and I think that the real character of the rebranding process has been defined by what we've understood about Moscow. And as we continue to find out more and get deeper into the discussion, I feel that the work we've done aligns itself with these ideas extremely well. Just let's explain a bit about ourselves. This is Oliver.
Hello.
And I'm Rory. We are together OK and RM. We started our studio in 2008 after working together for more than 7 years at that time. So we're long-time collaborators. Our studio was based on the idea of collaboration. So the initials is really the signification of that. We've now grown to 4 people. We've kept our team very small, very precise. But we have a group of collaborators from various fields. Photographers, curators, writers, architects, developers, and other designers which join our team when necessary. That's definitely been the case with this project also. We're working predominantly with in the cultural field. The cultural field definitely spreads pretty wide these days. I would say culture is certainly global. And contemporary culture, indeed, can be found in commercial and independent fields. We're proud to say that we've worked with some visionary practitioners, some influential thinkers, and also entrepreneurs, which have helped us to grasp and make successful projects.
And actually, when we first started the collaboration about 4 years ago, it was actually a key intention of ours to be collaborating purely with the cultural field. But as things have developed, projects have got bigger and bigger. And actually, as Rory briefly mentioned, we were working with quite a lot of, I guess, slightly more commercial projects, with projects getting slightly larger over time. And working with Strelka actually for us has been an amazing opportunity because it's been, I guess, the biggest cultural project we've worked on. Yeah. And it's allowed us to kind of test the 4 years of experience we've had previous to this.
So we're obviously graphic designers, it's important to say as well. Some of you may be graphic designers. I guess we assume that most of you are graphic designers that have come today. But that for those who don't know what graphic designers do, and still maybe fairly ambiguous term, I guess it can be described as making a change to people's lives through functional aspects, such as telling a story clearly, helping someone understand where to go in the case of wayfinding or signage, helping a business grow. And in terms of something which we feel is very, very important is the sort of subconscious pleasures which, as graphic designers, we can bring to people's lives on a daily level, through expression and through ideas, and through potentially the less functional parts of the communication. So we're just going to really quick, we really want to talk about Strelka today. This is kind of why we're here. But we want to just talk you guys through just some very quickly, and we kind of feel like we didn't want to dwell too much on other projects, but we wanted just to introduce how this idea of change, which we introduced a minute ago, has been important in almost every project.
And I guess it'll already also give you a very quick sense of the type of projects that we make.
So just the first slide here, it's a project we just finished for Snowden, which is a famous photographer in London. And part of what we did here is we reintroduced the cultural legacy of Snowden to a new audience. This slide represents the Snowden and part of the project, which is a collaborative platform. His first collaboration was with Acne, which is a fashion brand from Stockholm. This is a project we did for in Dubai, and we consider this, it's reimagining, in this case, the role of the contemporary art book. In this case, we produced a very, very large publication in a place which is usually much more of an informative publication for a big art prize. Feels rather unusual to be going through these projects so fast, because usually we talk about them in so much detail.
But I guess it's the one thing about this project to understand is that what we wanted to do was to introduce a little bit more about the kind of working process of artists into an art fair which is actually very, very commercial and kind of surface level. So that was like the key change we made there.
Just continue on this theme of change, just drift through these projects quite quickly. Rivington Place, which is an art centre in London. In this case, we're in charge of re-evaluating the client's brief to create a new brand in terms of strategizing a new direction for how the institution should communicate themselves. Just continue this introduction again.
Okay, so this project shows the reinterpretation of a curatorial premise. With this particular project, the curator had asked 7 artists to respond to the actual space of the exhibition, and actually a lot of the exhibits were placed in and outside of the exhibition. So the title enabled Beyond These Walls, the idea was to create a graphic interpretation, and the identity basically became a map of the space.
In this case, we're going to go to, this is a project we did for in Milan for a contemporary art magazine called Kaleidoscope. This is where we consider redesigning. So the changes here, redesigning contemporary art magazine.
Okay, so we're going to go into Strelka now. So just a bit of background on it. Strelka is an institute with the essential goal of changing the current visual, structural and intellectual environment of Russian cities. Strelka is a catalyst for progress, stimulating change through the facilitation of a wide variety of events and activities. Strelka provides the space where ideas are formed and the structural framework on which others can build.
I think the first thing we want to talk about with Strelka is really the objective of the brief. In the case of Strelka, it's really about Strelka was needing to refine the way it tells its story. That was critical. It must communicate with clarity the coexistence of the various activities that occur here. Strelka needed to become more open in sharing what, why, when, how, and who, both domestically and internationally, what the program was offering. And the new brand should communicate that Strelka is an experimental, radical, and collaborative project.
Okay, so we're just going to take you through the 5 key ideas for the Strelka project. So the first is that it provides a structural framework for the display and communication of multiple forms of content and ideas. And that just quite simply was expressed through the idea of the grid. The second is that it creates an explicit connection between the institute and its content. The third idea is that it communicates an institute with an international outlook, creating a unified bilingual voice. So the key here is just that everything that we presented within the brand was always translated.
That was a real key consideration for us. When we started the project, it was either Russian or English, and there was no real consistency of when Russian and English was used. It was really important for us that democracy was there in it for its international outlook.
So another key aspect of what we did was to portray an institution that is constantly redefining itself. I mean, Strelka as an institution is full of ideas and is constantly trying to do new things and to express the idea that everything is possible. So we came up with this evolving mantra, which is endless, really.
So you take the idea of the Institute for. When we started the project, it was Institute for Architecture, Media and Design. And in the case of Strelka, they knew they needed to say architecture and media and design, but there was no place for them to express this evolving, daily evolving idea.
No, sorry. Okay, and so the fifth idea is that we wanted to promote a democratic relationship between Strelka and the ideas, events, and people that help to define it. And by that, what we mean is by rather than just giving Strelka a logo, the logo or the word Strelka is always attached to more information which guides the viewer around the content and the ideas.
In this case, you may have noticed that each of the summer programs from now on, and this summer being the first, is named after the curatorial premise. In this case, it's Agents of Change. So everything this summer is based around the theme of change. It was also important to us that this democracy also occurred on a level where the name of the institution was no bigger and no smaller than those it was offering into its program.
I guess one thing also to mention here, which we haven't mentioned so far, is that the idea of the grid, which was a conceptual reference as what was actually happening in Strelka, what happens inside the courtyard. It was also like an opportunity to create divisions of content through the varied use of space.
It was also an opportunity and a metaphor for Strelka's activities and its continued questioning of and investigation into public space. So the courtyard itself is essentially the representation of the grid. And the grid represents this space, and the varied use of this grid in the various materials expresses the activities that would happen within it. So these are various examples and the most simple iterations of how the grid can be expressed. This was the proposal for the courtyard, which one of the pragmatic things which I think is really important to talk about is the production methods. Where we're working a lot of the time in Europe, especially in London, production is just so much easier. Mainly because designers, especially experimental designers, have already started to push the boundaries of production. And in Russia, we were finding that there was less manufacturers willing to work in an unusual manner. So what we wanted to do with the courtyard, and everyone at Strelka wanted to do with the courtyard, was to paint a grid. You'd think it'd be pretty simple. In fact, I think it was estimated at €25,000, which is an unreasonable amount of money. So it wasn't able to happen.
But anyway, the key idea with this grid was just to be able to express the varying activities. So the idea that you would paint these black lines on top of the courtyard which express the various activities which are going to be taking place.
And as it starts to roll out over the various materials, it starts to become a very coherent, clear method for communication. I think one of the most important things was that the design was able to be dealt with economically. And it's not only economical in terms of production, but also economical in terms of design. Strelka has an in-house design team, which are extremely competent. But every day, it was necessary to produce so many pieces of material. So the identity had to be extremely easy to use.
A key, actually, I mean, we consider this quite a key part of the identities because it manages, this is a sticker sheet, and it manages to kind of capture the spirit of Strelka in terms of the various uses of typefaces and also this developing mantra. I
mean, one of the things we should talk about with the typography is there's a typeface called Fugue, which is used as the core identity. We see that as a constructed typeface, which is very in line with the drawing of the grid. There's also another typeface which aligns itself with the institute, which is what we call a platform for adding in kind of classic or specifically Cyrillic typefaces. It's an opportunity to showcase Cyrillic typography. And we work really closely with Misha, who's extremely interested in typography, and especially Cyrillic typography, which is very difficult to... it's very difficult to find Cyrillic typefaces that were firstly designed for Cyrillic use, that were digitized. In this case, Lazursky, which is a typeface designed for the arts and culture, which is injected into the identity for the first year. After that, various other typefaces will find their way into this. This is just us in the last few days, and we've just been finding that the identity has become viral, and that anyone that works for Strelka has been able to start to take in the identity and start to use it in their own environments. Sometimes for unusual methods, but I think this
has actually made us smile, actually, to see some of the elements we've designed being used in quite expressive ways. And this is kind of what we always imagined, actually, is that people would be able to interpret it, in any way they like. This actually looks like the weather today. Okay, so one of the key deliverables of the project was to create like a signage system, which was something that we were really quite excited to do. Just go back to that one. And one of the elements in the signage brief was that we had to make something which was visible from the bridge. So the idea was to create something which was, quite enormous, slightly oversized, in fact.
It's using, again, this expression of the grid, which starts to work on an architectural level as well. One of the first proposals was, in fact, to take this architectural element and be able to wrap it around the entire building, potentially a little bit too extreme in this case. But we're also really inspired by Vdenha, which is a place we visited when we first went to Moscow, with Roman, who used to be one of the cultural programmers here. And Vdenha had a kind of impact on us, and Roman, who showed us around, was totally passionate about Vdenha too, mainly because it really expressed this contrast between development, independent entrepreneurship, in terms of anyone placing signs, being able to, trying to express their own ideas. And I guess that for us it was always important to have a really strong communication as soon as someone entered Strelka in this way. Just to try and push forward the idea that if you have ideas here, then it's okay to express them. These are the various parts you'll see as you're walking around the courtyard. One of the things which was quite disappointing for Strelka and us is that the program was supposed to be maybe at least twice as big this year as it was, but I guess every institution is facing this, and it's just the kind of the potential lack of funding in some ways. But a lot of the points of communication, for instance, in this case, the timetable was supposed to represent a week at Strelka. And we've had to adapt a lot of the designs in order to fit with a less busy program.
You might have noticed they're blank at the moment.
Yeah.
But that doesn't reflect the program, I don't think. Okay, so here's this is actually a star lecture poster, and the idea here was that each lecture would be posing a question. In this case, it's how does design change the city, and actually the continued program for each one always poses a question related to the change that architecture can bring.
And in this case, it's represented in the poster sites up the front of the institute, the kind of varied culture which occurs here, and the system which we've brought to Strelka has allowed for them to express the ideas on any level, really. On the right, it's essentially a gig poster for, the cool kids in Russia, and on the left you've got an architect by Dan Hill, who's an academic from London, and it's completely contrasted. And I think this kind of sense of universality is really important at Strelka, and it's really important to the new brand.
Okay, so another key aspect of the identity for us was always trying to kind of add content, add meaning, so that the people that come to the Courtyard could get a real sense of what was going on. So this is a series of, well, it's a billboard with a series of posters on it, which you probably can't actually read because it's too pixelated. But the idea here is that it's a series of posters which are always presenting what the institution is discussing this season, or what it's promoting, or what it's envisaging.
It's creating a clear agenda. I mean, something that the initial brand was not able to offer is just the ability for any curator or any practitioner at Strelka to share an idea. And that's just, it's at the very core of what we're dealing with. And, you know, this is, for us, really important. Even the guy that works in the Courtyard is able to kind of express ideas as well. These T-shirts are available in the kiosk, if anyone wants one. I think that one of the kind of independent projects at Strelka is the press. Justin McGrath, who's a collaborator and actually introduced us originally to Ilya, who's the director of the institute, to start the collaboration, is director of the press. They've just released a series of ebooks. We were in charge of designing the covers. The covers are an expression of the grid again, but this time the grid isn't present at all in the designs. Someone recently asked us what do they mean, and for us these illustrations are really intuitive illustrations of the subjects of each of the books. So in this case, it's about the periphery of Sao Paulo. We should just go through these. I mean, it's a lot as well about the seriality. And there was a piece of print which was designed for the launch in London, which was, when was it? Like 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Which should be in Russia soon.
Okay, so the website, and we're going to show you the app in a minute, was the opportunity to express the brand digitally. And one of the key things we wanted to do, like we had with the rest of the identity, was to create this real sense of activity. So if you look on the left-hand side, that's the homepage, which kind of extends even further down than that. And the idea was to constantly be posting different information. There's blog posts, there's like a revolving mantra which also exists. And at the center of it all is the calendar, which is obviously where you can go and get all the information you need on the events.
I think one of the important things for us in the website, which is at the heart of Strelka, is the ability to use simple resources. And actually, the website is completely built from WordPress, which is an open source software. And it has a technological feel about it on certain levels, but essentially it's a very raw, simple, rigorous system digitally. And so it does have its issues in terms of quirks. It was built with a fairly modest budget, but I guess we feel like it's really successful also because it feels somehow real, which is very difficult to do in the digital medium. You guys may have got this app already, but there's a little sort of movie which illustrates it. It's the first time we're definitely not app designers. Like anyone that's designed apps that's looked at this app probably knows that. You know, it's just us finding the clearest way to navigate a calendar. And I think that it has something, and I guess people that we've showed it to feel like it has something about it which may be a little bit new, mainly because it's so singular and straight to the point. So I guess we're kind of almost most proud of this element because it's really working hard for the Institute as well. And that kind of covers Strelka off, actually. So I kind of half regret not showing more of those projects at the beginning, do you? I kind of really regret not showing some of the things in more detail, and I'm kind of feeling in a way that I'd like to go back and show you guys some more of the other projects, if that was okay. Let me just be really unprofessional and try and find another presentation.
Why don't you just look at the website?
Because I just really don't like the idea of clicking through my own website. Here, where is the presentation? Let's have a look here. Bear with us. It's a small enough audience for me to feel like I can do this.
What are you after exactly?
Is there a presentation that we can show? If there's not, then we will have to use our own website, which I'd like to show you a project. I think that it's one of the things that I feel like it's important to talk about. We talked a little bit before about Rivington Place for about 5 seconds, and Rivington Place has a similarity to Strelka. And when we met with Ilya, who's our collaborator here, he was super interested in it. It's something that for us, as designers, it represents a lot of what we're trying to do. It's direct. It's as direct as branding can be, because all it does is takes away any subjective representation of an institution and just presents exactly what they're dealing with. You have a hub which represents the place, Rivington Place, on the left, and then you have a series of words which dictate its content. And I think that's something that we talk a lot about when we're doing workshops and when we're teaching designers and working with younger designers is you don't need to necessarily be scared to deal with simplicity. If you focus on the communication, then your tools, even the most simple tools, can really offer a lot. And I feel like in the case of Rivington Place and also Strelka, I think these represent this kind of methodology and also ideology, belief. And I guess we should show one more project, which we also touched on earlier. Bear with me 2 seconds. Where is it? Yeah. So Footnote to a project, as we said, it's a project in Dubai. This is as well something that I think that's really important for designers to feel that they can do. Often the commission is completely wrong. And that's certainly true with publishing. This was an art prize. It is an art prize in Dubai. It's 5 artists. Each of them raises about 150 grand, something like this. So 150,000 euros to produce an artwork in Dubai. And it's this, I mean, Tom knows. Tom's with us from London. It's this amazing spectacle, and no one looks at the artwork. It's a kind of field of contemporary art to show your friends if you're a patron of this prize. And one of the things that we felt was super important is to say to them, don't make a catalogue with just the finished works in isolation. It's not about that. Our job as designers and also our obligation to the artists is to try and show their artistic process. So we came up with the curator, an idea to call this project Footnotes to a Project. And it's a very, very large book which documents every detail of each one of the 5 artists' process. Each of the artists has how many pages? Is it 128?
Well, I think that the book in total is about 600 pages, but I think that was one of the things we enjoyed most about it, actually, because, I mean, in the previous year, the designers had made something which was about, I don't know, like a 26-page catalogue, which was fine, but what it didn't really do was do the process of art justice, which actually all of the artists really wanted to show was, you know, especially in this context, was to show actually what goes into making art.
So each one of these images is numbered, and then each number has a text written about it. So each image has a text written about it, and then it creates a compilation essay. So there's a comprehensive essay about each one of the artist's practices as well. And you can see that it's clearly an index of this collaboration between these 5 artists. And I have to say, like the guys I referred to before, who are the patrons of this prize, they really, really appreciated it. In fact, it was something that they started to realise that they hadn't only invested in a kind of spectacle, they'd actually invested in an artistic practice, and they'd given an artist an opportunity. And I guess that we could end there and take some questions, because I'm kind of eager to take some questions, actually. Yeah. Sure.
Do you know how the Strelka find
Yes.
job?
So Strelka has a director, Ilya. You may know Ilya. He was one of the founders of Strelka. He was introduced to us through Justin McGrath, who's the director of the publishing platform, which I showed you. We met with Ilya as a casual meeting, really, an introduction. And about 5 days later, he emailed us and said that he'd like us to be involved. So it was a good meeting.
This project was, in fact, when we first got commissioned to it, I think they wanted to have it done within about 2 months or 3 months. But obviously the process of branding actually it's a lot longer than that, and it's very rare to be able to produce something as comprehensive as this project in such a short period of time. So the project, I guess, launched just before the summer program, kind of just by the skin of its teeth, with various aspects of the project rolling out, in the 2 weeks after it launched.
I guess we're still doing it as well. I'm not sure when the project will actually finish. I guess we're kind of part of the team now, and we're really enjoying it. So I don't know. I mean, it's an ongoing project.
Как вы нашли ваших первых клиентов?
How do we find our first clients? Ever in the world? Who was my first client? Who was our first client?
Basically, when we first started working together, we kind of did it after about 5 years of working, having experience at other studios. But when we left those studios, we were quite confident and quite sure that we wanted to kind of trod our own path and find new ways of working. And when we first started, we actually didn't have that many projects to work on, so we kind of sat in our studio for a while just working on self-published publications.
That's not true.
Is it not?
No. This is why we needed a minute to think about that. Our first ever client was Jeannie Coates.
Oh, right, okay.
She was a girl at a college who had graduated really successfully and started a contemporary art, furniture, something or other, and wanted us to make a poster.
This is going back 10 years.
This is going back 10 years. But our first client as OKRM was a girl that I'd worked with in New York, the agency I was working at, and was starting her own business. And it was a straightforward corporate identity project, actually. And it gave us the money we needed to start. So it's funny that we forgot that, because that's kind of...
that is true, by the way.
Yeah. Wow. We should have a chat.
And are you doing publications? Yes, tell me more about this. No. You doing a public? You public your project? Yes.
Self-published. When we was
that the question?
I think the projects that we self-published.
You public your project? Yes. How you doing this, and in what place you make publications?
Do you mean publications about our work, or about something else?
About your work.
No, we don't publish our work ourselves, but we have published our work a number of times.
I'm pretty sure I was talking about our self-published project.
Are you talking about our self-published project?
Yes, I mentioned that a minute ago. Where's our website?
Yes.
I
hope you are talking about that, otherwise we're about to...
I think, yeah. This is potentially just an interesting thing to show quickly, but when we first started our practice, we wanted to to make some publications which expressed our desire to kind of, be creative with words. And actually this is the first one of these projects. And the idea here was that we took basically the new words that have been introduced to the English dictionary. Every year there's like this 16 which are specifically kind of spoken about by the Oxford English Dictionary. And we basically decided to take these new words and make new sentences out of them. So, for example, you get sentences like radio physics is a hell's a poppin' topic. The idea that, radio physics is, I don't know, some random new word, and hot swap saves subprime hardware.
Yeah, it's some of them are silly. In the case of one of the new words in the English dictionary in 2008 was big, but not big like big, but big like cool. So you can now officially say big in the House of Parliament, and it's completely official. So it's kind of weird. It's like the English language constantly evolves in a really unusual way, and this was our way of promoting that.
And just one other one I'll just quickly talk you through is that we kind of noticed and we're quite interested that the English language just adopts words from so many different countries. And I think it's kind of because of, England's close relationship with countries like France, Germany, and just the historic passages of time. But this particular piece here was about making a French sentence using English words and an English sentence using French words, which still totally makes sense. I'm not going to read them out, but you can read it if you like.
It's kind of eccentric, like sometimes English people can be.
Exactly, yeah.
We made the book ourselves, yeah. And we made it in an edition of 300 copies and sold it at bookshops for £5.
But you can buy one if you want.
We still have about 35 left, 40
35.
left. 40, I did count them actually, yeah.
How you will describe the work in Russia? Is it surprised you in some ways? And what was the surprise? What was the surprise?
Spicy or
surprise?
Surprise.
Just describe what difference between Russian and, for example, British works.
Oh,
like
yeah.
In art.
Oh, what, in general?
Yeah.
Wow.
The difference between English words and Russian words?
No.
Working in England and working in Russia.
Yeah, no, sure. That's a really good question. I think working with Russian clients is actually more... It's been amazing because there's this complete, and it might just be a Strelka thing. We haven't had many Russian clients. We've just had Strelka clients.
One, you mean? Strelka.
Well, Strelka clients, many. We had about 10 clients here. Everyone is really, really kind, like very satisfied and openly satisfied with what we're doing, which sometimes can be a bit unusual for us because England is extremely modest. It's very, very rare to have somebody love what you do. So that's been really lovely.
I think actually one key difference between working with Russian projects and English projects is that actually, I guess in London, the arts projects at the moment, cultural projects, are very, very underfunded. So the scope of the work that you can actually make is a lot smaller. And I guess, Strelka being one of the premier cultural institutions in Moscow, it's allowed us to have a lot more, there's a lot more funding to produce and to make a better project, which in this case has kind of, been great.
So that's been a real difference for sure. Like just that level of development is just so much better. England's become extremely fast. It's very fast-paced. The clients that we work with have done it all before. They've worked with lots of designers. They've worked with lots of kinds of projects. They've worked, on the cutting edge, let's say. Whereas here, we feel like it's just newer. There's an excitement, which is really satisfying, and also productive as well. So, yeah, that's the difference. We really, really love working in Russia, basically. Yeah.
What's it?
Whoa.
What is your first shock in the Moscow, like for designers, like in the city?
Was it a first shock?
Yeah.
What
the question?
What is your first shock in the city, like Moscow, for you, like a designers?
For shock? What do you mean by shock? Like a
Surprise of the city.
What,
Yeah.
in Moscow?
Yeah.
what in terms of design?
Yeah.
So something we saw.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely Vdenha, no? Vdenha.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Vdenha, when we first came here, straight off the plane, we came to Strelka, and then we stayed in this hotel over here, which is pretty crazy, and just lived between the hotel and Strelka. And then we went to Vdenha. It was the first time we went anywhere in Russia, in Moscow, Russia anyway, actually. And yeah, I mean, that's just full of design, and it's crazy. So, you know, yes, that.
If you're talking about architecture as well, I think just generally a lot of the town planning here seems absolutely crazy. I mean, it's the kind of thing you wouldn't necessarily find in England.
Sure.
Like you'll find like a 500-year-old church next to a kind of like 2006 block of flats.
Yeah. There's just this kind of
like bizarre contrast.
Radical contrast, definitely. And Strelka has such contrast with anything else, like Vdenha, for example. It's like this different world. And we sort of have to go and see Russia, really, because it's just, I'm sure the contrasts are even more extreme in certain cases. Yeah.
Can you please talk, I don't know, just about your education process? Because I think that you went to art colleges, both of you, and when you're like an art student, even in Russia, you do a lot of like, even, I don't know, you experience a lot of failures, and you experience a lot of bright moments and everything. Maybe like there is some kind of professor that really influenced you, or maybe like there is one thought that really bears with you even right now. Just can you just translate something from that experience?
I'd say like one I guess great experience that me and Rory both shared actually at university is we went on a field trip to Prague in our. We were both at the same university, yeah. That's where we met.
We went to college in Bristol.
So in our second year, we went to Prague for a week's field trip, and that was basically because there wasn't, I guess, none of the tutors really encouraged you to do any specific things. It was like go out into Prague, find something you're interested in, and make a project on it. And me and Rory just got really, really interested in like the kind of fabric of the city, and like trying to find out the truths of that city. And that was something which I think was quite, influential in our, certainly in our.
I guess what one of the things that's important about our education was that it was in our own hands. We went to a classic art college in terms of there was painters next door, there was sculptures, there was people making like stuff, like really abstract stuff from their sort of heart. Bristol as well, I don't know if any of you know Bristol, but Bristol's like where Massive Attack and Portishead and sort of drum and bass came from, and it's like they call it a city wrapped in a giant Rizzler, which is like a cigarette paper, because it's really contained and really intense, and it's really artistic, but with little control, little I guess rigor. And when we were there, we got really influenced by rigor, like Swiss. Firstly, it was Swiss modernism, because it was just massively contrasted with where we were educated. And I think we kind of developed our own education, really, in terms of learning how to be graphic designers. And so it's kind of unusual, really. Yeah.
Will you be making more workshops and projects with students? And do you like the experience in general? Just be honest. Don't be afraid to hurt me.
We've actually got another one on Monday, so we're kind of straight back in it.
Yeah,
this time in London.
Yeah, we've got a workshop on Monday in London. We do a lot of workshops, and we make a point of it actually, because Well, I think I'm enjoying this way more than I was a lecture, for example. I think it's kind of a good example. Both of us enjoy dialogue with others, designers, students, practitioners, whatever. It's kind of really important to us in our work. So yeah, workshops totally are important.
It's actually a lot harder work than it is in the studio. I mean, we do work hard in the studio, but I always feel that when you do a workshop, it's just the most intense week you could possibly imagine. I'm sure it was for you guys as well. Kind of exhausting. No, you're ready for more. I'm ready for a drink.
That's so unprofessional. Say that.
Is it?
You ready for a drink?
Yeah.
I
heard that some people drink whilst they work. There's a workshop coming up, I don't know, next week where they...
If we were designers
I think they
in the
drink
60s,
shots of vodka every 2 hours.
No, it's true. If we were designers in the 60s or even the 30s, if they had designers in the 30s, we would have been smoking and drinking like constantly, no? It's kind of like, I don't know if that would have made better work or not. I'm not even sure what I'm talking about now. I'm just kind of,
You want to drink?
Well, yeah. Yeah. So, thank you very much then, Moscow.